This is the first violin practice video for Gaelic Castle. We have a lot of different things to consider in this piece. There's either going to be light and soft parts, or there's going to be very heavy accented parts. And the really big challenge is that we've got a really fast tempo. So it's marked at 176 beats per minute. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1. That's the main melody. All right. So in order to make that happen, we've really got to think about part of the bow and how much we're using. So for example, okay, on the main melody for first violins, if you look at measure 7, this is where we're going to start. And we don't want to go too much bow on the half notes. We want to think 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So notice how I'm kind of keeping everything right in this area. All right. Now the difference is when we get to somewhere like 11 and all of a sudden it's piano, we want to make sure we change bow lanes. So watch how I jump bow lanes. Okay. So I'm going to do, let me get into that. So I'm going to start at 7 and watch how at measure 11 I change bow lanes. So I jumped over to near the fingerboard and I started to play there, and it was just a little bit lighter. The biggest thing though with making that really fast lift, two things need to happen. Number one, if your pinky is on top, it's going to catch the weight of the bow as you make that lift. If your pinky is falling off, you're going to lose control. The other thing is to make sure that you don't extend that note, that half note before the lift, too long. So like this. Lift. So I gave myself enough time. Let me show you that one more time. Lift. And again, to make the difference to piano, okay, once I get there, I'm switching lanes. I'm also playing a lot lighter in volume, okay? I can change that when I contrast at measure 15 to forte. So this is measure 14. Then loud. Use a little bit more bow there to emphasize that dynamic change. 19 is very accented. So the difference here, we're going to continue to play forte, but then we're going to just press in with our bow. So remember, to create a really good accent, what you're doing is making the stick of the bow touch the hair, and then I can wiggle my string, and then when I release that, that's going to make the accent. Obviously, that's happening on a lot faster time at 19. So for example, if I go in slow motion, you can see my bow touching the hair every time. But this time, I'm going to go up to tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. And I really just have to kind of almost push in each time, okay? Same thing at 27. Look over at 27. This is just like at 11. Okay, so at measure 11, I jump to the fingerboard lane right here. So I want to do the same thing at 27. Now be careful, first violins. You're not the main melody here, okay? You want to make sure that you back down but don't slow down. So for example, here's measure 26. So those half notes go by really quickly. All right, let's talk about tuning at measure 31 all the way up to 35. Okay, this is a really important melody. I'm going to play it slowly so you can play along and tune each note with me. So make sure you're listening there. All right, back up to tempo, and I want to talk about the transition to pizzicato at 35. Here it is, back up to tempo, starting back at 31. Switch. All right, so what happens there on beat 1? We've got 1. Beat 1 happens in the cello and the bass. You don't play on beat 1, so you've got to mark that in your head. So watch how I do that one more time, going from 34 to 35. Rest, bum. Okay, so make sure when you're switching to pizzicato, you're going to take your bow, hold it like normal. You can either reach out your pizzicato finger like this. Now that gets a little out of control. You can see how I was hitting the other string. What you might want to do, okay, and you do have time to do this, is really quickly wrap that bow into those fingers and take out your pincher fingers. And so it's going to look like this. Rest. Switch. Okay, and so you've you've got to practice that transition. Again, I would do this slowly first. So here it is a little bit slower. 1. These are accented. Make sure you're playing on beats 2 and 4. Rest, 2, 3, switch. And then you're really heavy, so you can start that stroke at the frog. All right. The only other thing that I want to talk about, and again, a lot of the ideas I mentioned at the beginning transfer into the rest of the piece. If you look ahead to 59, okay, so the rest of it comes back, same melody, but then we get to 59 and we have a sudden piano dynamic. Make sure you don't slow down. This is where you're going to want to set your metronome and practice switching into this part. So for example, I'm going to start at 58. So I didn't slow down, stayed in tempo. All I did was remove all the weight from my bow, so I was able to play piano, and then fortissimo, make it really strong to the end. So it's going to sound like this. This is 58. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. Make sure we give that last half note its full value. Something to keep in mind when practicing. Go to the sections that challenge you the most. Break those apart. This is called chunking. You want to find the chunk that makes you think and pause, and so practice that part. Make sure you slow it down like we were talking about in class, and then gradually build up your tempo just a little bit more. All right, and know where those parts come back. So for example, I mentioned, we had 11 was piano, and that comes back very similar at 51. So make sure you transfer your knowledge across the piece. Happy practicing.